I got to take that picture off first thing. How about that? I always forget that. Hello, everybody. I have to tell you, when the music starts, I don't see that there's anybody out there, and now I do see there are 5 people out there. And as soon as I see that little number pop up, I'm so happy that there is someone out there. So welcome to the live stream. And I see someone already has posted a message. John, hello, good to have you here. And now there's 6 people. So if you'd like to say hello, just say so in the chat room. I'd like to know who's out there, and I'd like to say hello to y'all. And more people are joining. So I am excited about today's episode. We're going to have a good friend of mine on the podcast. His name is Roger C., and he is the founder, creator, curator of the website AA Agnostica, that almost anybody who's familiar with secular AA is familiar with AA Agnostica. But before I get started with introducing him, let's bring on Mary, my co-host. Mary, how you
Hi,
doing?
John.
Good
Hi,
to see you.
everyone. Good to see you too. How are you doing?
I'm not doing bad. I think, was it last week I said I wasn't going to get a car, and then I did get a car
And then
after
you got a car.
I couldn't live without one. So I'm happy. I have a little Ford Fiesta that's really great on gas, and I'm going to take it on an exciting trip to Jefferson City, Missouri this week. So
Great. I gave you about 4 weeks, so you lasted a week.
Yeah, you really can't live in Kansas City without a car, honestly. Hey, Missy, good to see you. Bobbert, Bill, John. And what are you doing, Mary? Are you traveling now?
I will be traveling this week, but I just haven't decided the destination yet. I have a week off,
Okay.
and I'm not sure. It's either going to be stay home, staycation, or San Francisco or Hawaii. I'm a
Wow.
retired flight attendant, so I can go where I want
How
when
nice.
I go standby.
Very
So I'm
nice.
just looking at what the flights look like, and might try to cram it all in 1 week.
Okay. Well, I'm excited about today's guest, and I know you are too. I guess we should go ahead and bring him on, Roger C. So without further ado, and I need to make sure that we welcome Roger appropriately with the welcome he deserves. Hi, Roger.
Hello.
And the crowd goes wild for Roger.
They do go wild for Roger.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Tal. Hey, Bill and Bobbert. Good to have you all there. Roger, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. It's been a while since I've had you on the podcast, and you've done quite a bit of recorded material with me. You've been on a few episodes. You have also come out to my hometown, Kansas City, Missouri, and hey, Tyler, and spoke to my home group and other people in the area. And so it's just, and then you and I, of course, have talked a lot over the years as well. So it's really nice to have you here. I think it's an appropriate time to have you as well, because I know you're kind of winding things down at AA Agnostica. And I think this would be a great time to revisit the history behind it and your experience with it. So if you would like to entertain us with the history of AA Agnostica, we are ready to listen. And those of you who are out there in the audience, please feel free to comment in the live chat or call us at our toll-free number. I'll open up the phones in a little bit, but the toll-free number is 844-899-8278. Roger, tell us about AA Agnostica. What is it? Why is it?
Okay, well, kind of a treat to be able to talk about it. I got sober in March of 2010, and I was going to pretty traditional AA meetings, but they were getting on my nerves, meetings that ended with the Lord's Prayer, etc. And I discovered a group called Beyond Belief in Toronto, which had Thursday night meetings, and I would go to every single one of them. It was a secular AA meeting. It would take me about 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back, but I just loved the secular AA meeting. And what happened is that on May 31st, 2011, the group was booted out of the Intergroup, the Toronto Intergroup. And it was booted out because it used a secular version of the 12 steps. And I was stunned with all of that and very disappointed. And that's when the website AA Agnostica was launched. And it was initially launched for the purpose of just telling people where and when this meeting is going to be held. But it became much, much more than that. And it was, around that time too, there wasn't much secular AA. This Beyond Belief group was the first group that was launched in Canada in 2009. So here we are at 2011, and it's been booted out. And there aren't very many. So I decided, because I didn't know much about it, I decided that I was going to write an essay and post it on the website AA Agnostica on the history of agnostic groups in AA. And I thought, well, I'll do that. It was a long weekend, so I thought I'll do that over the weekend. Well, there was nothing out there. And it took me until October, it took me 3-4 months to be able to find the information about agnostic groups in AA and the whole history of it. The first group was launched in Chicago. The first secular AA group was launched in Chicago in 1975. Well, who knew that? And then there were other people who started secular AA groups. The first group ever, called We Agnostics, was launched in Los Angeles in 1980. So it was like, okay, all this history. And so I shared that, of course, on the website AA Agnostica. And while we initially had thought we'd just put the time and the day and all of that about these meeting groups, we started inviting people to write articles, which was really amazing, because there was I'm still not aware of that many websites that do that sort of thing. So to date, by the time this website will be closed we'll stop posting new articles in June, there will have been a total of 747 articles posted on AA Agnostica.
Wow.
And it's a website that grew and grew and grew. It started out with, in the first full year, 2012, there'd be about 6,000 people a month who would visit the website. 2013, that jumped to 17,000. 2014, it jumped to over 40,000.
Wow.
So, and it was really an interesting period of time, because there were all these new articles, all these people who were posting articles on the website from all over the world. It was really fascinating. It was wonderful. And the other thing that happened is that all of a sudden there was a secular AA. And it was alive, and it was doing different things. One of the things that it was chosen to do, as I say, the website was launched in 2011. The first secular AA conference was held in 2014.
Wow.
And then in 2016. And then the one Mary attended in Toronto in 2018. And now there's another one coming up post-pandemic in 2022, of course.
Right.
Around the area of Washington, D.C. Yeah. So, it was a really interesting period of time where there was this growth of secular AA, and all of a sudden it became part of recovery, and it became part of AA, and it became quite stimulating for a number of people. And one of the things that was that AA Agnostica was early on, and I haven't talked about this much before, but it was a true comfort zone for people who were in recovery and just, were atheists, agnostics, or free thinkers, or just didn't believe in that anthropomorphic male supernatural deity. And they were so relieved that they weren't alone, that there were other people like this, that, and that it worked. Initially when I was going to AA meetings in the very beginning, and this is what disturbed me, I was repeatedly told that I wouldn't be able to stay sober unless I found a God. You ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
A couple times only.
Well, at least I was told I needed to pray to stay sober for sure.
Okay, well, it's really bizarre because, like, today, I go to a secular AA group called We Agnostics, which I launched in 2016. And over the last couple of weeks, we've celebrated a guy with 40 years. His name is Alan. This coming Monday, we're celebrating a guy with 35 years. His name is John. Last week, we celebrated a guy with 10 years. His name is Eric. So, there is an amazing kind of understanding these days, which I don't think there was at all when AA Agnostica was initially launched, that, yeah, secular works, secular recovery works. And it was a very interesting period because when the website was initially launched, the first book that I published was called The Little Book.
Right.
And why was it called The Little Book? Because of the big book.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to call it The Little Book. And what it contained was what it still contains, and the second edition is recently published. What it contains is 20 secular versions of the 12 steps and 4 interpretations of each of the steps. And, so now today, I don't think there are very many people who can gripe about alternative 12 steps or secular AA meetings.
You know what's interesting about that little book is, okay, so here, I'll just tell you my own story, which you're familiar with. So here I am in AA for 25 years. Never occurred to me that I could rewrite the steps in some other way. It never occurred to me. And, I still meet people that way today who's like, how do, I'm an atheist. How do I understand this? And it's like, well, write them out in your own language. So that little book is great because it gives people a way to jumpstart their own thought process of, because you got these different options. How do I understand these things? Which, by the way, is what the big book asks you to do, is ask yourself your own understanding of these things, by the way. But yeah, so that's pretty cool about that book. It serves a really good purpose there.
Yeah, and it was a huge pleasure to write it, and it belonged immediately after my history of agnostic groups in AA and the whole understanding of the fellowship of AA, including secular people. So it was a lot of fun, and that's what the website has been about from day one. Was just it's a comfort zone for secular folks, and who are in recovery, and so that's it. That has been its purpose. One of its purposes, at any rate, is to provide that comfort zone, and so it's been a real pleasure to do it. And the amazing thing about it too is I've met so many people as a result of the website. And it's been such a pleasure to know these people. And, I'm now, of course, in the 11th year, the last year of the website. And I've chosen 50 articles that I'm posting in the last year. And there are about 9 left to go. And, talking about meeting people that have been very special to me, of the 50 articles, 5 of them are about people that I knew who have passed away since the website was launched. The first one was a guy by the name of Charlie Polachek, who died in 2012. And he's the one who started the We Agnostic group in Los Angeles. And then I had a friend, Wayne M., who passed away. And then, of course, Ernie Kurtz in 2015, who was, who I discovered and learned, the author of Not God, A History of Alcoholics Anonymous, as simply early on when I was trying to write this little history of agnostic groups in AA. That's when I met Ernie Kurtz, and what a pleasure to have known him and to have been in contact with him a great number of times. Then I had another friend, Dennis Kilborn, who started groups in Vancouver, who passed away. And of course, this coming Sunday, there'll be an article about Life J.
Oh, good.
Oh, good.
He wrote, he passed away in 2019, but he wrote 18 articles on AA Agnostica and 14 on AA Beyond Belief, if you remember.
Yes,
AA.
I do remember.
Yep.
Yeah. And he's written a book. He wrote a book called About Being Here. And so what a great guy he was, too. These are all people I met because of AA Agnostica, the website. And so it's been a huge contribution to my own sobriety and my determination to continue to be a sober human being.
Yeah.
And likewise, Roger, you have been a huge contribution to my sobriety in secular AA and to many people around the world, from just writing the little book, writing the history of AA agnostics in AA and AA Agnostica. So likewise. And I have a couple questions. First of all, how did you come up with the name AA Agnostica?
Well, that's an interesting question, because initially the website was launched, as I said, to be able to let people know when and where these meetings in Toronto were being held. But after 6 months, it was initially called AA Toronto Agnostics or something like that. But after 6 months, I decided to change the name of it to AA Agnostica, and I just picked it out of nowhere.
It's brilliant. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, it worked well for me. It explained very much what the whole website was going to be about. And there were initially there were many complaints by people who would contact the General Service Office in New York and say, hey, that's got to get shut down. That can't be AA. AA Agnostica, are you kidding me? That's got to be shut down. But, I've always had a good relationship with the General Service Office, and they contacted me and they said, it's great. You got a good website.
Wow, that's good to hear. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, I was, initially there was some problems, but they went away immediately and very quickly. And
what kind of problems, Roger?
Well, there were people trying to get me to shut down the website.
Who were they? Were they people from like the General Service Office, or were they just nut jobs from around the world?
Just people around the world who, just thought that was,
just non-specific nut jobs. So I have a question because of the history of agnostics. Does GSO still say that the version, if we have alternative secular steps on the wall of a group, that we still have to say this version is adapted from the original 12 steps, which were first published in 1939 in Chapter 5 of Alcoholics Anonymous? Because that was a sticking point originally. Is that still hold true today?
I don't know. I really don't know. There's no, as I mentioned, our group was initially booted out because we had a secular version of the 12 steps. And 5 years later, it took 5 years, almost 6 years, for the group to be readmitted. And that was because the GSO was going to boot the Intergroup out.
Wow.
For having booted us out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
That's what was so interesting about that is GSO was actually on the side of the Toronto groups. And what Mary, you just read there, that was the eventual settlement, which was an odd settlement, I thought, but I don't know if they still have to stick with it. But the settlement was that those groups in Toronto could continue reading those alternative steps as long as they read, I guess, what you just
right, the
read
one
there.
sentence that these are
but that didn't come from GSO. That was the settlement that Larry K came up with the Intergroup.
I agree, and I ignore that completely. I mean, we, as I say, I launched We Agnostics groups in 2016, and what we have are 4 different versions of the steps, secular versions, and then we just hand it around to people to read at the beginning of the meeting. They pick one of the 4. and they don't have to say anything other than, and people love they love those steps. So yeah, I know that technical part of the groups being allowed back in, but everybody ignores it as far as I'm aware.
I'm going to put up a
Okay.
link to your
The little book.
literature site. Yeah, because you've got a lot of books out there. I think did you started publishing books? Like you must. I don't know what your background is. I don't think you were a professional writer, but you are a good writer. But what got you interested in publishing books? Was it just a lack of secular material at the time?
Yeah, it was exactly that. One of the things when I was, as I mentioned, I got sober in 2010, and while I was at a rehab facility called Homewood here in Ontario, I would go into the library and look for books that might be helpful to me. And I couldn't find any. I didn't like any of the books. Like I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan at all of the big book. In the first 164 pages, there were 281 references to God or a hymn with a capital H, etc. And that's not of help to me. Now, mind you, I have a master's degree in religious studies, but I'm an atheist or an agnostic, however you want to call it. And while so I don't like the God bit. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Never has. The supernatural, anthropomorphic, male deity. Give me a break. I mean, that's just. And that there are many, many more people who are moving in that direction these days. I have just read an article called, what's it called? Here it is. It's an article called "Fewer Than Half of U.S. Adults Belong to a Religious Congregation." Now, they've done some polling, and the initially around the time that the big book was written, 72% of people went to
Oh wow, I didn't know
church.
it's that high. Crazy.
72%. And the religious membership in the U.S. has now fallen to 47%.
Oh wow.
So,
It
the
was a
fact
different world.
the fact that the fact that the big book was written with the God thing is pretty understandable given when it was written.
Sure.
Right.
But the fact that it still exists today, and it's a conference approved book, and there are no other conference approved books without, I mean, if they want to
Sure.
publish the little book, I'll let them do it, But we're moving forward, in my view, and so AA also has to move forward, and it's moving forward, I believe, but very slowly, and much more needs to be done.
Can
Right
you,
now,
before you go into that, Roger, Missy has a little question for you, and I was going to address this towards the end of the interview, but she wants to know, and I think a lot of people are concerned about this: is AA Agnostica going to go away? What's going to happen to all those stories out there?
yeah, I see that.
I just wanted to settle her down. So,
Okay, well, I'm glad to answer that. The website is going to stop posting, or I'm going to stop posting on the website new articles, any articles at all, in June. But the website will remain online, alive and accessible to anybody who wants to read an article, read one of the 700 or so articles that have been published on the website. And I find that very interesting, because each and every day, we get about 1,000 people who come to the website, and
Wow.
they go to, and I don't even understand how they do this, but they go and they read 200 different articles that have been posted on the website. I assume that they Google something
Yes.
that they want to read about, and that's how they end up going there. But because of that, because there are still, a good chunk of people who visit the website daily, and because they visit and view so many different articles, a couple of hundred each and every day, I intend to keep that website alive.
I think that's smart.
I'm so grateful. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be able to do that, and because people are still visiting it.
Yeah,
And,
there's a need. There's a huge need for any secular websites, and yours is fabulous. And that's the link I hand to people that are new to secular AA here in the Bible Belt. When people come to our secular meetings, yours is one of the links that I give them.
I can't remember, Roger, when it was when I first discovered AA Agnostica. I can't even really remember the timeline when I started thinking that I might be an atheist in AA, but it was over a period of time. But I do remember searching and eventually finding AA Agnostica. And it came at a time when I was ready to make that change of helping start a secular AA meeting in my city. And at that time, you had a service on AA Agnostica that would you like to start a meeting in your hometown?
right.
And I signed up for that. And it was so exciting when I got the emails that there were like 2 women, I think, in Kansas City who wanted to start a secular AA meeting. And what was so exciting about that to me was, wow, I'm not alone. There are people in my city who would like to do this.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out that those 2 never did connect with me, but someone else eventually did. And we got it going. So I wonder if you have heard similar stories over the years of people who learned about these types of meetings and started them as a result of learning about it from AA Agnostica.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly have heard that. And people, there's something like, I had a friend, Chris, who kept this collection of all of these names of people who wanted to start a secular AA meeting, and he would help them out. He would, send, if there were a number in Kansas City, he'd send them all, the names and email addresses for all of these people. And, about 100 meetings were started as a result of that. And that felt really, really good. There was a lot of, there was so much that happened initially with the website. One of the things, for example, is we had tried to get the Grapevine to publish a book with.
Oh, I'm glad you're talking about that. I was wondering about that. Yes, that's a great story.
Yeah, we had tried to get the Grapevine to publish an article or a book,
right,
with various stories that had been shared with them that by secular people, and they wouldn't do it. So that's when we decided to publish a book called Do Tell, which was stories by atheists and agnostics in AA.
Yep.
Okay.
And, it was really interesting because holy smokes, we got a lot of offers from people who prepared to write, to be part of that book. And so we eventually decided that there were going to be, an even number of women and men, and there were 15 stories by women and 15 stories by men in the book. And as far as I can recall, John, one of them is your article.
I came later in Do Tell. You came out with Do Tell after Don't Tell.
Ah, right.
Yes. And I was wondering about that too, the time frame. When did Don't Tell, was Don't Tell before or after that convention in Santa Monica? Do you recall?
I think it was before.
Okay. So see, you were already beginning to build a little community of secular people online through AA Agnostica, and then it really kind of exploded after that conference.
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so.
And what is your top article ever read through AA Agnostica? Is that still Atheist Guide to the 12 Steps?
Yeah, it is. That's the top article. But one of the things that's visited daily on the menu is the alternative 12 steps. Like I've placed 6 versions of the 12 steps there, the secular versions of the 12 steps, and that gets 40, 50 people every single day. So there are various parts of the website that are very popular, and that's one of them. So, and that makes sense to me.
So what is it gonna look like now when you're not going to be focusing on AA Agnostica? What is that gonna look like for you?
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
That's a damn good question.
Does it have a damn good answer yet?
No, I don't. I don't. What I mean, I'm looking forward to the summer because I play golf. So, I was actually supposed to be playing golf today, by the way, but I thought, no, I have this podcast to do. So yeah, it's a bit of a question for me, but I mean, when you do something for a decade, to me, that's enough,
Yeah. And you did this. What gets me about it too, Roger, is you started this when you were really newly sober.
Yep.
I mean, and so this has been. I know that this is a large part of your recovery program. It's got to be. I mean, because when this podcast is for me. This is a huge part of my recovery, and I imagine you're going to have some sort of a transition. Not having this. But you've probably been already kind of been going through that because you've been kind of winding things down, and you've got your home group, We Agnostics Hamilton.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really important to me. My home group, it meets every Monday and Thursday, and I mean, I've been going to these meetings for a little over a decade, 12 years. And it's funny because I'll be going to a meeting thinking, holy smokes, do I need another meeting? Do I have to go to a meeting? But by the end of the meeting, I'm so happy I went.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have been there, to have heard these other people, and listen to them share. And I'm inspired by all of that, and I learn from that. So it's a very happy event on Mondays and Thursdays for me.
See, I remember where my recovery was before I got involved with AA Beyond Belief and then the podcast Beyond Belief Sobriety. And then I remember my experience after that. And I have grown so much more as a result of this work. And what I find interesting about you is you've been doing this from the beginning. I wonder if you can even recognize how much this has developed you in your recovery, because you've had the advantage of learning from people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Ever since you've been sober.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been unbelievably good for me. It's been really helpful to me, and it goes on and on and on. I mean, I have a friend in Poland now, Witek, who's translating the little book into Polish, and I think, well, that's great, and so that sort of thing goes on, and it's very. It's been very inspiring for me. I don't know what I would have done. That's what I've done for the last decade, and so I liked it very much. But there are other things we can all do, right?
Right.
Did you write other books before the secular books about religious studies?
No. And the little book was the first book because we'd been booted out for having a secular 12 steps. So I thought, damn it, I'm going to publish a book with secular versions of the 12 steps. And
but I thought maybe in academia, because you were the atheist in the religious studies.
Yeah.
How did you get into religious studies as an atheist, as your focus?
Well, that's a very good question. What happened is I grew up as a Catholic, and my parents were Catholic, and
same.
And all of my neighbors were religious and Catholic, and I went to church every Sunday and all of that sort of thing. And then when I hit the age of 19, I suddenly thought, this doesn't make any sense to me at all. No sense to me at all. And, you know, it was a stunning moment for me, and a period of time where I was 19 years old, and I decided I'm getting out of here, you know, and I started hitchhiking around Canada and doing all kinds of different things and doing stuff like that. And but it was like, you know, I was curious as to, why do people believe in a God? I mean, is there some logic to that I should be aware of? And that's why I ended up with a Bachelor of Arts in Religious Studies, and I went to McGill University and had, you know, got a master's degree in Religious Studies, and then I worked on a PhD for a number of years there. I was there for about a decade, and I taught as well there. But, you know, there I was a well-known atheist, and people just, you know, they had total respect for me. And after all of that time, you know, I read the New Testament in Koine Greek. I tried everything. After all that time, I still couldn't understand at all why anybody would believe in a God. You know, it just didn't make any sense to me at all. There was no logic in it that I'm aware of at all. So, you know, it had a huge impact on my life. And then, of course, when I got to AA and there was all this God stuff, I thought, Jesus Christ, what's going on here? You know,
It's funny. I've talked to a few people that have gone on to study religion and either got a doctorate or a master's in religious studies, and then they in studying it, they learned that they were an atheist. They learned that they could see what was behind the curtain, I guess, is how some of them would describe it. And what's sort of humorous, I guess, is I took a class at a community college and I came to the same conclusion.
That you were an atheist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was like after, I mean, it's really interesting to learn the history about how it all came together, but you do realize when you study it, even just a little community college class, you realize, wow, this was really created by human beings. It was not, it really wasn't supernatural. So, okay, before we start, Roger, I'm running out of time. I really do want to find out what you think about the state right now of secular recovery options. You know, do we have more of them than we had years ago? And also Alcoholics Anonymous specifically. How is AA doing? And I guess that's a hard question because AA itself is hard to define. I would say, to define it more narrowly, the General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous, is it doing what it needs to do to keep AA up to date, in your opinion? And where do you see AA going in the future?
well, now that's a very good question. And
I'll sit back and let you answer.
Yeah. One of the problems with traditional AA or the General Service Office is conference approved literature. Because the only conference approved literature is literature that they have published. Okay, let's be quite clear about that. And prior to the pandemic in 2019, they made $9 million selling conference approved literature. So they have a reason for wanting conference approved literature. So my view of the matter is that has to change. They have to ditch that conference approved approach to literature. They have to ditch that. Just simply because I think that, you know, as I mentioned, you know, the number of Christian people has dropped enormously. And the other thing too is that if AA wants to be inclusive, it needs to drop that conference approved literature, because whatever literature works for you is fine, should be fine. You know, my opinion these days, and it's just my opinion, by the way, is that you can believe whatever you want to believe. I don't know a single other human being who believes exactly everything that I believe. I don't know one. But my opinion is that you can't push your beliefs. You should not push your beliefs on another human being. That's wrong. That is wrong. And, that's the interesting part of our We Agnostics group here in Hamilton, because we do have religious people who attend that meeting. And neither we atheists and agnostics or we religious people try to push our own beliefs on another human being. That's the problem with traditional AA meetings and with the General Service Office. If they're just going to have that kind of literature, the big book with 280 references, 81 references to a God, that's wrong. It can be called conference published, maybe, but conference approved means that when you go to a traditional AA meeting, by and large, the only literature is conference approved literature.
True.
And that, I think, is the major problem. I really do believe that. I really do believe they have to throw that conference approved notion out.
You also mentioned the profit motive, and Glenn Rader believes this too. He says that AA World Services, the publishing arm, I guess, of AA, won't produce a new work, a new big book, because they're making so much money off of the current book. My argument would be that doesn't make sense, because if you're running a business, you would want to come out with a new improved product that would sell even more. I would think that if AA came out with a new improved big book for the 21st century or whatever, it would sell even more. But I think it's more complicated than that. I think that there has been a culture that has grown up around the book, that AA World Services and the General Service Office, although they might be sympathetic with those of us who might have a more secular approach, they're afraid, in my opinion, of the larger membership out there who is so devoted, almost dogmatically, to that book.
Not almost 100%.
I was being nice, but you're right.
No, you were being nice, but yeah.
If you're dogmatic, I mean, you're just dogmatic. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I think that is the problem. Is that kind of dogmatism, and so I don't know. I don't know if it can grow up or not. I literally don't know. My friend Joe C., the author of the book Beyond Belief, he has said, and I keep quoting him all the time, my bold prediction is that if AA doesn't accommodate change and diversity, our 100th anniversary will be a fellowship of men and women with the same stature and relevance as the Mennonites: charming, harmless, and irrelevant.
Yeah. I do think there's one bright spot, one brilliant thing about the way that AA is structured, and that would be group autonomy. That, even what we talked about with the conference approved literature, people are mistaken when they think that only conference approved literature can be read in an AA meeting. Groups are autonomous. They can read whatever they want to, and they do, as we know. Our secular groups certainly do that. And I'm thinking that what could possibly happen with AA, because AA, you have to break it down into different parts. You have the General Service Conference and the General Service Office and the AA World Services, which kind of is at the bottom of the triangle. And then you have all the different autonomous groups. I think those autonomous groups are going to live on forever. I think that they're just going to evolve and just grow in different ways, because they have the power to do their own thing. It would be different if the General Service Conference was dictating what these groups have to do, that they all have to follow the same path. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope I live long enough to see how AA does evolve. I think what might become irrelevant, quite frankly, is the General Service Conference itself, because I think that groups will decide they really don't need that. They are free to do their own thing, and they're communicating now because we all know because of COVID, all geographic barriers are broken down. And
True.
that's how the General Service Conference is structured, by geographic areas. All of that is just totally now unnecessary. So I think, in my opinion, just my opinion, I think that the future of AA is going to be individual network, a loose network of groups that really aren't tied too closely with the General Service Office. And I think that might bear better for them. I don't know about the big book and stuff. It still saddens me when I meet someone in their 20s who thinks the big book is great. But I understand. I was there too. I was a guy in my 20s thought it was great. They might grow out of it. I did. Anyway, sorry, I'm blabbing there.
Yeah.
There's so much more to read now. There's so many more books, like Roger's books. I mean, there's so many more opportunities to find out about how to do the program than just the big book. I mean, and God, you got to have more than 164 pages or you're going to lose your mind. I know so many old time AA people with over 20 years that secular AA has really expanded their recovery and inspired them all over again, like they were inspired in the beginning. And they might not identify as an atheist or an agnostic, but they just find the secular approach to be so much bigger and more flexible and open and thought-provoking than just the traditional AA approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have here in Savannah. A lot of people that are traditional AA type people and don't identify as atheist, but they go to secular meetings and do the secular format because it's more inspiring.
Yeah, and our meeting, we have, as I mentioned, religious people, and there are two of them in particular who are highly religious, who have been coming to the meeting for 2 years because it was one of the few in-person meetings that was open during the pandemic, and they just love the damn meeting, so they joined the group, and it's just like, because of the sharing is so good, and it's not dogmatic.
Right. It's not.
And
Very true. A lot more inclusive and diverse and flexible, and to thine own self be true, which is supposedly what AA it was about, but it changed. For me, it got a lot more religious and a lot more dogmatic in the mid, like 2009-ish time.
Yeah.
Is when I noticed it.
Yeah, very much so. And that's exactly when our, like, as I say, it was in 2011 when our group was booted out. I don't see that anymore. Even the GSO, even though it hasn't done everything it needs to do, for example, if you go, you can find there, the GSO has a list of all of the AA groups in North America. And you can go there, and now they have a category that they call secular, So, there is some growth, but there's more to be done.
A lot more, yes.
Roger, did we get into, I know that we touched a little bit about how you started the publishing books because of not having secular literature, and you contacted the Grapevine to have a book produced. Did we talk about what you were doing to eventually get published, One Big Tent? Did we go into that? Because you were actually working on that with the Grapevine, weren't you?
Yes.
Before it was. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, it was actually Life J wrote an article where he listed all of the articles since about 1940 that were secular that had been published by the Grapevine. Now, there weren't very many.
Yeah, but there were some. There were enough for a little book.
There was enough for a small book. So they had about 40, 45 articles that they had published over 70 years that were secular. And Life J wanted them to publish those articles in a book. And so we asked them to, and they said no. So then we asked them again the next year, and they said yes. And they ended up publishing, I'll grab the book. Publishing One Big Tent. And here it is. One Big Tent. They ended up publishing this. And I believe one of the Grapevine people was at the Toronto
Yeah.
conference,
Yep.
second conference.
Yes. The editor, senior editor, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that was really quite nice. And it isn't the best book, but it's progress. It's moving forward. And,
that's what I thought too. There were people who criticized the book when we did a couple book reviews on AA Beyond Belief, and there were some critics of the book. And yeah, like you say, it's not perfect. And that pamphlet, also the God Word pamphlet, might not be perfect, but it's a beginning. Before that, there was nothing.
Nothing.
Exactly.
To represent the agnostic or atheist. And now you've got something that can be updated and added to and evolve. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And, when One Big Tent was published, it created a lot of fury among a lot of traditional AA people. They were really upset with that. Even now, the AA preamble, when it was changed from women and men to people, even that has, that's a big debate right now in the GSO and traditional AA as well. So that's bizarre, but that's the truth.
A little local flavor from the Kansas City area. So during that time when when One Big Tent was being considered for publication and going to be discussed at the General Service Conference, our delegate was the chair of the Grapevine committee at the General Service Conference, and I was participating in the area assembly at the time, and I would talk to him about that. Getting that book published and everything, and he worked for that, and he pushed that through on that committee, and it was just a lot of fun to work with him and learn about what was going on behind the scenes on the committee level, and to see all the acceptance of the people in the western area of Missouri for this book. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. They loved the idea of the book. And speaking of the conference, so when that book was published and I brought it back to our group in Kansas City, I had everybody that I could find in our group sign it, and then I delivered it to the chair of that committee. So
Wonderful.
It was nice that he was so helpful, and it was just inspiring to know that we were supported by the AA community at large. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who do support and want AA to be more inclusive. I think that those voices that we were talking about just happen to be the loudest voices. The dogmatic voices seem to be the most,
dogmatic.
Yeah, they are. They're so because they're so certain about their way.
Right.
I guess it's just the way it is. So
yes. Yeah.
Anyway, we're coming down to finishing up the hour. Are there any parting thoughts, Roger, that you want to leave us with and about your experience with AA Agnostica, or what you would hope for us in the future as you move on with your life?
I think I've probably, expressed everything I feel already. But yeah, it's been certainly one of the most pleasurable things in my entire life has been creating the website and spending a decade meeting incredible people as a result. I wouldn't even be talking to you two folks if I hadn't done this website.
Roger, I wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't for you.
There you go.
So you had a huge influence on me for sure.
Yep, me too.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great.
I have a quick question for you. If you could just give me a brief laser pointed summary of how you got to walk in the door of AA. So you've been sober 12 years now?
Yeah.
And so had you heard of AA prior in your life, and then one day you just thought it was for you? Or can you, in the amount of time we have left, just get through the door?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I hadn't heard too much about AA prior to getting sober. And as I say, I was in a rehab facility, and they sent me to these meetings, and so I learned about them. But as I say, after going to them from March through April, May, June, something like that. I was getting frustrated with the meetings, with all of the godly stuff. So that's when it was really stunning for me to discover Beyond Belief and a secular AA meeting. And I went to that from 2010 to 2016. You know, as I say, 2 hours to get there, 2 hours to get back. I'd go there every Thursday because it was an important meeting for me. And then I launched my own secular AA meeting here in Hamilton. And by the way, it is very, very well treated by the AA Central Office here in Hamilton. You know, very well respected. So
Really good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are a lot different now than they were back in those days. In most places, there are still some places where, you know, the AA community isn't so welcoming. I will call out Denver, Colorado, for example. Oh, it's Georgia, for example. Good God, there are still these places that exist where there are issues and for no reason. So one last comment from Fred H. He loves hearing about the history of secular recovery's growth. Thank you, Roger, John, Mary. Great stream today. Yes, this was really great, Roger. Thank you so very much for doing this. And thank you for your friendship and all the help that you've given me over the years. It's been a real addition to my recovery for sure. So
thank you, John, and great to see you, Mary. And
you too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sign off, but before I do, I'm going to make some announcements real quickly. You know, we have our weekly listener meetings at Beyond Belief Sobriety. So join us this Tuesday on Zoom at 7:00 p.m. Central. That's 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. And our guest is going to be Mark C., who's our guest on episode 32. And he's going to talk about any recovery related topic of his choosing. And then we'll open it up for comments and questions. And then future speakers are going to be Glenn Rader on April 19th. He's the author of Modern 12-Step Recovery, and David Whitesock from episode 197, who will be talking about recovery capital. So be sure to join us. I will post the Zoom information here in the chat. And also, if you care to, I just erased it. If you care to have never mind, forget that. I'm going to go ahead and post this. Well, maybe I won't. I'll post it later, folks. So anyway, with that being said, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Mary. It's been a lot of fun. And our funky disco music to say goodbye. Oh, yeah. I've seen some pictures of Roger back in the 1970s, and he would have been grooving to this kind of stuff. Oh, yeah.
Where did you see those?
Facebook. He's posted a whole
oh my God, I'm gonna have to go
collage of Roger over the century.
Oh, I have to look at that.
Take care,
Roger,
everybody. Bye-bye.
Roger, I got a question.